When Parshas Nitzavim is read together with Parshas VaYeilech, Shevi'i begins with the words Ki avienu el adam asher nishbati lavo sov zava eretz zavas chalav udvash. Right? We recognize this pasuk ve'achal v'savea v'sava v'doshen. We recognize the conceit here. Ufana el Elohim acherim v'avadum v'niyatzuni v'hefiu. Oh my goodness. We'll come into Eretz Yisrael, you'll come into Eretz Yisrael, and because everything will be good, v'yachalta v'salvata, right? But you'll leave out Beirachtos Hashem Elokecha, because you'll say, Kochi v'yotzem yodi. It is the power, I did it, and you will chase after the false gods, the idols. They're the idols of stone, and they're the idols of self, and the Kochi pentishkach, Kochi v'yotzem yodi, and that's the beginning of the end. So, as a result of this, okay, this song, this poem, Hashira Hazot, will serve as testimony against you. So we meet it with a shira, right? This shira was referred to, the Atah, in the pasuk immediately before Shevi'i, the Atah, kitvu lachem et hashira hazot, write this shira, write this shira. And the question is, of course, what is this poem? What is this poem that is being written? And it refers again and again that this poem, Vayichtov Moshe Tashira Hazot, he wrote the Shira Hazot, Bayomahu, on that day, the last day. And when Moshe finished writing Divrei HaTorah, okay, he commanded the Levim to put it in to take the Sefer Torah and put it in the Aron. And because when Am Yisrael rebels, Kitasu Hara, okay, this poem will testify against them. The poem that specifically is being referred to is, of course, Parshat Ha'azinu, which is entirely a shira, entirely a poem. But the idea here is far-reaching beyond the shira of Ha'azinu specifically. And in fact, this is the last mitzvah in the Torah, to write the entire Sefer Torah. Because you can't write the Torah as separate parshiot, a technical detail, and that's how the Rambam approaches it, or because the entire Torah is a Sefer Shira. The entire Torah is a book of Shira, I hesitate just to use the word poetry because that will make it seem less than. But after all, when Shlomo HaMelech, the great poem of Shlomo HaMelech, is Shir HaShirim, it's the ultimate poem. It's the ultimate poem. It's a poem of poems. In order to understand the meaning of this at some kind of level, okay, of what we're trying to say about what the Torah is trying to tell us about the Torah. The problem is a problem of language. As many of you know, the Rambam points right away at the beginning of Mishnah Torah to the problem in the first parak, the problem of language about God, God's hand, God's arm, and so on and so forth, God's seeing, and so on and so forth. These, he says, are the stuff of poetry. The stuff of poetry is metaphor. All poetry is metaphor, or it's not poetry. But yet, if we go one step further, and if you read the Rambam carefully in the first parak, all language about God, even echad, is metaphor. It's trying to express something that is beyond our normal use of language. Go one step further, and you'll understand that all language is a metaphor. A tree is not a tree. This finger is not a finger. It's a word. So it's a symbol system. The comic strip Pogo said famously, for those who remember Pogo, and you guys certainly don't remember Pogo, but you can speak to your grandparents, okay? He said, man is by nature a symbol-minded creature. Symbol-minded. Pronounce symbol clearly, otherwise you'll stumble over the poetry of that. Now, that means to say that all language is a symbol that we have for something else. When you stretch that symbol to its ultimate degree, and you're still trying to stay within language, then you have what we'll call a meta symbol, greater than, a great symbol. And that's the ultimate meaning of metaphors about God. Now, of course, many people confuse the term shir with another meaning of shir, and that is music, song, melody. But of course, that's because all poetry is, by definition, sung. Okay, it has to be sung. Okay, no poet reads. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, watch the famous scene in Dead Poets Society, in which the students are being instructed how to read a poem, by Walt Whitman. Okay, wonderful scene. Shira. Now, why is this particularly important? Why is it particularly important? I'm not trying to convert you to become poets, but at least to be sensitive and understand that that's part of being Jewish. You get up every morning and you say many, many psalms. Psalms are poems sung. That's what psalm means. V'shirei Dovid Avdecha, nehalelcha, neshabechacha. We're saying psuke de zimra. Zemer is certainly melody. So it's worthwhile thinking about why the Torah is called a Sefer Shira. What is the notion of Shira? And here I would just like to conclude by pointing out something that is one of the 13, it's the 8th principle of the 13 principles of faith. And that is that there is no word in the Torah and no sentence and no parsha and nothing that doesn't have layer after layer after layer, ultimate, endless, infinite layers of meaning. And the Rambam says, somebody who says that is going against one of the ikarim, one of the fundamental principles, one of the 13 principles of faith. And he gives an example. There is no difference between Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, and Vachot Lotan Timna, right? I mean, the Alufei Esav, the descendants of Esav in the Torah, there are just layers of meaning that we don't begin to understand. But to say that anything is unnecessary, anything that Moshe just added because he was writing history, that is heresy. That is completely and totally objectionable. And the Rambam concludes this in the commentary to the Mishnah, where he says this, and I only don't know it in the Arabic, so I'm just saying, he says, Gal Einai quotes a pasuk in Tehillim. I don't understand these things. We don't understand Gal Einai. If my eyes were only opened, I would, if you were Ribbonu Shalom, to open my eyes, V'abita flows mitorasecha, and then I could see the wondrous things, the Pella from your Torah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give us the wisdom to search for the meaning in Torah when we don't find the meaning, and to understand when we find the meaning, there's another level of meaning. God should give us the wisdom to be humble and grateful for the gift and in the presence of Torah.